welcome back to the Talk Past podcast. I, of course, am the regular host, NC, and I have again with me the Bruce. Hello. You can introduce
Hi,
yourself.
welcome for having welcome
Oh,
welcome.
welcome me.
Yes, welcome to you to your own show. You can
hmm
tell I have been drinking. No, I'm just
It'll
kidding.
be it'll be hosted by M Night Shyamalama Ding Dong next time,
There you go.
instead of
Thank
the
you,
happening, the welcoming.
thank you for having me to the show once more. I've worked with NC several times in the past. We've done stage combat and entertainment and reenacting, as well as I do HEMA instruction and HEMA combat.
hmm Indeed, but we never. Well, we did a training fight once, but we
We
never had
did.
a fight. Uh,
No.
no, which is what this video is about, actually. Um, kind of a series, if you will, at least in my mind, kind of talking to certain people. I spoke with Melissa and a few others in regards to the fights I've done with them, and then maybe put on like a little watch along on the channel,
hmm
separate of the podcast on that regard. But I wanted to, for people in reenactment, SCA festivals like the one we did, or maybe here on YouTube or whichever, people that are putting fights together for film, etc. Sort of what, and maybe this might sound a little elitist, but I think every method is valid. But at least in my opinion, I do feel there are certain people that get it, that understand the concept of putting a fight together and executed it well enough, if not perfectly, and or at least for the most part, right? Some people have good fights, some people have bad fights. Um, so that's why I have you here, because when I think of some of the best fights that I remember, right, something that made me obviously not forget the fight itself, but not just that it happened, but that the story you told, the emotion you brought out, the feelings that the crowd were having, everything that created a moment in our 1 to 2 minute little choreographed situation scenario. Yourself in three fights, you versus Jara with Natalie,
hmm
um, you and Brandon, and obviously as the Bruce, hence your name. Um, and of course, off the top of my head, I'm forgetting, but you and
hmm
Sarah. Um, and then of course, you can never forget Tara. Tara versus Brent, Tara
hmm
versus Dan. Uh, That, yeah. Those 2 specifically for me in regards to her fights, and I know I'm kinda skipping some other people, so my apologies if you listen to this ever, the 2 people out there. But, I wanna kinda get into what you've done and sort of our mentalities in putting together a fight, which is what this video is gonna be about. How to put together a good feature fight, whether it's SEA, reenactment, festival, film, whatever. So let's kind of go to the sort of the beginning here. Obviously, we have the setup. You know how we get into the point of getting a fight, which is well as you mapped out as well. Uh, and I'll just go off of that. The preliminary start, which obviously we've got our considerations, which I presume you mean the aspect of what it takes to get into a fight, get a fight, not get into, get a fight, earn a fight, if you will.
For the considerations I'm assuming that the considerations are you've already received a
Touche.
fight. Um, and realistically, that's why kind of your first consideration is what has the director given you? Uh, Literally, you go into a fight and a director may call out and say, it's going to be Bruce NC and Melissa, and here's who wins, here's who loses, figure it out and go.
hmm
Because that's pretty much what you and I have been handed over the years. And at that point in time, when you have, obviously
Yeah.
veteran fighters like you and myself, then being paired with other people who maybe need some of that direction, there are a few other things that go in during that. But the main breakdown from there, and I always put this at the top point, no matter what you're doing, safety. And that should always be your first
Yeah.
consideration. I mean, I hate to put that out there all and say that's all you should ever think about. But the reality is, you and I both handling live steel, and with the knowledge we have from stage combat, and with my knowledge from HEMA combat, it doesn't matter if those blades are dulled. It doesn't even matter if it's a stick that they're fighting you with.
Mhm.
There is a horrible amount of danger in there should a choreography go incorrect.
Exactly.
Um, but from there, I think we step to the idea of, what entertainment are we as actors going to get out of it? Because we're a bunch of vain divas. No, I'm
Mhm.
kidding. That's that's just you.
Yeah.
I'm but realistically, if we're not enjoying what we're doing, the audience is going to feel that. How many times have you and I seen a fight where the people just literally look like they may be slogging through it, like just
Mhm.
and that can come from many different factors. Maybe they wanted to fight somebody else. Their ego's getting in the way of another person. Maybe they're not clicking with their fight partner. Hell, maybe environmental. How many times have we gone out there exhausted by the time we hit that chess field?
Yeah.
Um, but my whole point from where I come from, if I'm putting together uh, a fight with you and another person, my first part of the table is going to be, all right, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? And what do I want to do? All within that realm of what we have been given. And we'll see if we can make it work. And then,
Precisely. Oh, go
and
ahead.
oh no, and I was going to ask your thoughts on it because I mean we're throwing this back and forth, so I'm
Indeed.
tossing you the football on this one. To what
Oh,
do you
yeah.
think on that?
Yeah, when I start a fight with someone, it's or a choreography, as I very poorly said that word, choreography. Um, for me, now I think of what do you want to do? What have you never been able to do? What would you like to try? Something like that. Obviously, we'll reiterate safety is literally the first rule, and it's the rule in any form of stage combat, whether it's film, SEA, wrestling. Even though I guess wrestlers don't want to be safe anymore, but not everybody can be Bret Hart. But that, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll kind of blanket that. But I always try to go into it. What do we want to do? First and foremost, give that a try. I know for us at least, that initial day where you're announced is always kind of a field day. You're feeling each other, metaphorically, in terms
Mhm.
of how the fight's gonna go. I don't know anybody that got their full fight done in one day. Um, so I like to just sort of, me personally, I'm more of like a throw a move and let's see what happens. But I know some people, and this episode specifically will target that concept. But some people, like Dan, yourself, Tara, go into a fight thinking about who are we, what is our motive, what is the story we want to tell with this fight, right? What do we want to convey in the short period of time that we have on the chess field? And
Right.
that actually, I've never had that consideration. I'm always like, let's just start throwing moves and we'll come up with a story after. I'm more of like, get the fight done and then let's work with our characters. But now I'm kind of leaning more toward, okay, so what's the scenario? Who am I? and what should this fight be? What does the director expect out of it? You know, um, words. So yeah, that's my thought.
Now, I will take a step into an interesting situation that I had in one of my fights where the director announced the three people inside the fight and said, give this person just a few moves to in the fight.
Hmm.
And I went against the director because I wanted everybody in my team to have an equal chance to show themselves. I specifically went that way. I outright said it. I said, listen, this was supposed to be something where you come in at the end, but this is not going to be what happens. You deserve to have just as much time out here as we do. Let's make this work.
Hmm.
I could tell you a lot of people would not go up against a director like that. And thankfully, the director never called me on it. But there have been fights where someone comes at the end for 10 moves.
I've had that fight.
Yeah,
You know, now granted, on my fight, considering the person, it was appropriate to be that way. Um, with yours, everyone involved in that fight was a veteran and should have had equal footing.
right.
Now I understand if maybe the director had an idea in terms of a story, but I don't know if that was conveyed. But I think the way it came out was the way the fight should have come out.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And you and I both know that when it comes down to you have this many people, if you have a plump year, still, as a director, want to get people into those fights. So instead of, you make a 3 person or a 4 person fight, and you're like, just give these people to come in at the very end and give them a few moves so they can feel like they're in the fight. Then you have the
Yeah.
lean years where you're really having to pull whatever you can together as a director. So I don't necessarily fault the idea or the attitude of that. More like
Mhm.
they get a showing, they get something. But for me, I don't like that. I'll figure out a way outside the box to write around that so everybody can actually get in on the fight.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of people won't go head to head with a director on something like that, or even just throw the fight together and say, here's what we have, here's where it's going. And depending on the director you have, they may be more hands on or they may be more hands off. Like they may give you the idea in the beginning and then just, okay, well, it's done. Go ahead.
Hmm. Precisely. You know, my four-person fight that I just spoke with Melissa on was very much a fight in guiding her, the newcomer, to feature fighting. So, I took a very, very hands-off approach, sort of like a stand back approach. And she started the fight with Jeremy. And
Hmm.
then Katie and I kind of came in and we did the whole four-person thing. I don't really, I think I mentioned with her that I don't really think we had a story so much as building her character. Um, and then just kind of letting it all turn to chaos. But
Well, and that's
your
pretty much full chaos when you have a 4 person fight. Just
yeah,
the fact that you have 4 people moving around that field at once within proximity of each other, that makes it incredibly difficult to choreograph. So I give
yeah,
you massive amounts of credit. I've only had to fight 3 people. Well, I've only ever had 3 people fight in my space, and on occasion having to fight 2 of them at once.
mhm.
And that's tough.
Oh, I've done that too with, Sam and Carly.
Hmm.
Um, but for you, with your one with specifically with Jared and Natalie, uh, of course, you guys took the crowd. You got the crowd involved in the emotion and the story that you guys were telling, and, barring whatever the director may have had in mind, you and those 2 very specifically crafted something that I think was one of the more memorable fights. And that I think is something specific for this episode to discuss is how to make a memorable fight, how to make a fight that people will, well, obviously, yes, remember, but look back on and see as something to aspire to reach, to inspire them. And Obviously, I don't remember all the details of everything, right? But it reminded me toward the end, the way you guys did it, similar slightly to the Harry Potter fight back in 20 whatever, maybe 2011. Um, yeah, where Adam we're doing a fight as James Potter and I don't know who Adam fought. Who knows? I don't. But anywho, Adam fought him. Somebody, whoever it was, somebody fought Adam, and I don't know. It's been forever. So he has a moment in this fight, and of course we have someone playing Lily Potter, right? And I details, but she gets attacked, kind of like incidentally,
Hmm.
and or accidentally, I should say. Um, Actually, I believe she got like poisoned or something. So I gotta remember who he fought. I really don't know, but I keep wanting to think of it as Jeremy because they had really great fights too. He and Adam, but and this is only during the show. This wasn't during the lead up because we didn't have a Professor Snape until the actual show.
Hmm.
Some people were just kind of brought in because they were friends of the cast. But this Snape was just he was Professor Snape, right? He was as close to Snape as the actor Alan Rickman, and
Okay.
he's in my corner for the majority of it, just for presence, right? We got a Slytherin corner and all the other houses. I'm in there with as Draco with Draco's family, and then that's pretty much it. Um, they have this fight. Lily gets injured, and Snape has a thing for Lily. So this dude playing Snape literally told what to do, literally probably that day, probably an hour before, because you know how sometimes things are, and he just gracefully and emotionally wafts right through, pushes everyone aside, drops down, and does exactly what he was supposed to do uh, in the fight. And it was incredible and emotional. And I teared up. And it was just perfect moment. And similar situation with you and Natalie and her character. Because she was playing, I believe, your wife?
Hmm. That
Yeah,
I had brought back from the Crusades.
of course. One of the trophy wives, right? Or
No, he.
was it like a legit?
It was a legitimate thing. No, she was my daughter. I
Oh,
took her as my daughter after I took her as my daughter after I killed the person who was her caretaker during the crusade. That's
well,
what it
she's
was.
definitely not a trophy wife then.
No, no,
As
no. You see,
unfortunately was a thing back then.
right.
Oh, and today.
No, Marshall
Well,
had a single wife and 10 children.
ooh, there you go. But obviously, she got injured from chair. Again, at the moment exact, right? Kind of escapes me, so I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
But then
She got killed by him.
touche, touche. Um, and then you kind of run up to her, and then you have this big moment, and the crowd is into it, and it just brings everyone into the fight, right? These little moments of emotion and humanity that I think a lot of people are neglecting or lacking.
I
In
think you are correct in that. I think a lot of veteran fighters realizing that a lot of the people we work with have egos. They like to look in the mirror at themselves. I mean, to an extent we all do. But I think that kind of brings us back around to the idea that we could sit here and casturbate with each other, make the best character we could possibly be, and only worry about our fight partners. But in reality, all of these things come together, and I'm going to use a term that shouldn't cheapen what we do, is the audience entertainment value of what we do. We
yeah,
have 1 to 2 minutes to encapsulate the attention and the endearment of the audience. And you know when they're not interested in something. You and I
oh yeah,
both know that there have been fights that people have been bored of. They make
mm,
no noise. There's
yeah,
no engagement.
yeah. And
Um,
not to make a quick hot take, but I mean, there are certain people who are only there to fight, who put nothing into their characters, pretty much nothing into their fight and think they're the best in the world at what they do. And I've seen hundreds of people walk out of those fights because
Right.
there's nothing there. It's a hollow fight. People know it's choreographed.
Yep. But
Continue.
that is an interesting monster in and of itself. So in attempting to capture the audience, I think I like that term better than the entertainment value, but capturing the audience. Um, we don't, we have drummers in the background that get them into the fights. So you can have theme music and stuff that evokes kind of like an emotion out of you
Mhm.
during a fight scene. But realistically, your fight is a 1 to 2 minute loop that you literally have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's the way I view it. I don't think that everybody views it that way. I think everybody views it just as, my fight is naturally going along. But when I put something together specifically for the choreography, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if something goes wrong, we can pick up at a next section in case it gets that far out of bounds. But when you develop that story, you have to be able to, number one, project, especially if there's something you have to tell the audience that is that they need to know. Um, the other thing is it's got to be a simple enough concept. You don't want to sit there and have a 5 minute diatribe. You'll lose the audience within the first 30 seconds. They'll get bored. But the easiest way to do this is go to what people know. And I mean, I'll look at it. I'll look at it from the perspective of most everybody has watched Game of Thrones, and we don't talk about the final season, but most everybody has watched that. Jack Gleason plays such a good villain in Joffrey because we all know that person. We all know the spoiled rich kid who has never been told no. That is a concept that easily people can get behind. The hero or the underdog are two concepts that are very easy to convey very quickly and keep everything moving. You can do it from a combination of body language, dress, weaponry. Uh, for example, you take somebody who is let's look at Deb. Deb is fantastic at both playing somebody of low station and playing the heel or the underdog. She really is. Um, I give her a lot of credit. That is very easy for her to sell. She's good at it. Um, Once the audience gets behind you, and you only got to hook them for a minute. You need and if they're light concepts like that, you don't need a lot of dialogue to get them there. So basically, in the beginning, you're establishing the narrative. Basically, who's on top, who's on bottom, how you expect this is going to go. As you move into the middle section of building the fight, which this is my opinion, if you are doing choreography, don't make it visible, but have a start and stop in your moves so you know if something goes wrong, you can say go to part 2. You can either core or get close enough to your fight partner, no one's going to hear you, and you move on from there. Um, but in the midsection of your fight, that's where you can ramp up and really deliver home on the narrative or change it up. And then of course, in the end, you're tying up the loose ends, you're bringing it to a close, and you're basically back to the beginning. You're resetting. And the main reason I say reset, you want to get that audience peaked up, hit that middle, heavy peak them at the end, and then reset them because the next fight is coming. The next set of fighters, actors are about to come up, and then they now have to. You want to make sure you end that. So they can pull the audience in on their new narrative. The other thing is trying to not have the exact same narrative. Like if you have two slaughter fights back to back, that's just no good because the audience
Mhm.
is going to be bored
Yeah.
with it. Do you have
Right.
anything to say about that?
Oh, indeed. I was actually mostly listening because yes, that is exactly the point. Of what people that do the festival we did or other festivals, et cetera, really should understand in what we do is that approach. Um, I think that's good information for people to learn from, at least getting into the fight. In terms of my opinion, that's the exact same. Yeah, no. I mean, I learned also from Dave, who also does the three sequence, if you will, three sequences, three acts, as part of a fight, middle, beginning, and end, and then finding a way in each step that you can take out if you have to, or kind of find your footing. Same thing with Sam and Carly and I. We had a very distinct beginning, middle, and end. Um, I don't know if Zach and I did with our King fight, but ours was a pretty short fight. It was very much a slaughter fight, but kind of like an underdog fight, but it also kind of led into the melee. So that's a different story. Um, but going back on yourself in terms of coming up with going into a fight, in terms of story, obviously, let's go over quickly you and Brandon, and then you and Sarah, because I mean those two fights, King, and then just a run. What was it, like first chess match fight? Just kind of thrown in the
Yeah.
middle there.
Yep. It was.
Two fights of equal footing in two completely different stations, having the same exact audience entertainment value, as you mentioned, capturing the audience. Uh, Obviously, you had a very specific story going into your fight with Edward as the Bruce. So maybe we'll start with you and Sarah, because that one you kind of did. I mean, you had a little bit, but really, you kind of had to put something together, right? Um, what did you guys kind of brainstorm going into that to create how you were going to convey the story of those two characters? Because they had a story, a very small blurb, but of course the Arthurian legend that you had. What did the two of you sort of come up with to try and convey that story and that emotion through your fight?
Wow, that actually was an interesting situation because up until the very last day of when they were starting to um, cast, when they were coming right down to the end of casting, I said I had been talking about it, talking about the idea because I had already been cast as Pellinor, and I was like, man, it would be so cool to fight the questing beast. And I was sitting there chatting with a bunch of people, and Sarah heard me and she came over and said, "Hey, Tony, I really want to, I would love to do that." And I said, "Okay." I walked over to the director. I said, "I would like Sarah as my fight partner, if that's possible. I think we're going to have a lot of fun together." And he turned and he looked at me and he goes, "You sure?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Okay." And then Sarah and I sat down and I said, "All right, let's talk about what we're going to fight with because you're a beast, which means you're probably not going to have any weapons or anything like that." So we came up with this whole idea, especially with the hunt of the questing beast. And I said the only way I could protect myself from her, because she wanted to use her sword in battle, would be to wear armor. And you know me, I'm the armored guy on the field almost all the time.
Hmm.
Um, so she said she wanted to have a sword through part of it, so we started sitting down and working through it and working it out. And you know how hellacious these summers get to be
Yeah.
with everything. Um, Sarah and I worked through what we thought would feel right. We'd do three moves, see what worked in there, and stop. put it together. 3 more moves, put it together. 3 more moves, put it together. Ooh, this would be fun. Can we get this in here? Sure. I'm like, hey, you want to clothesline me? And she's like, God, you know I want to clothesline you. But that fight, I'm gonna say that that working with Sarah really was a treat. Um, she had things she wanted to do that were easily within the bounds of what was accomplishable. Um, she gave input. Didn't have we didn't fight about anything. We just were in such the mindset that we were having a good time with it.
Mhm.
And to a level, it was almost like we think this is going to be a comedy fight, but we want to have like a serious underlining to it. We want this to be an actual well put together fight underneath. And it just turned into this, it blossomed into this beautiful rose that came together. Um, no, the fight followed all the steps that we talked about and came together so well that it took me a second to really think about the fact that we were working on a fight. And Sarah, like I said, I would work with her again if I was still doing stage combat, but it was really just a fun fight, and we even kept bringing up the fact that we wanted the audience to be entertained, which is why
Mhm.
we did certain things. It's almost like we focused more on that, and as we did, the two of us in the things we wanted to do got better.
Yeah.
So, so
And
there.
and and I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't think about, what you said in wanting the audience to be entertained. I think that is the most important tenet of what you wanna get out of your fight. Because, again, not to go down on those people, or be down on those people, I should say. We have people, friends, who they'll go into a fight and all they think about is themselves. All they
Mhm.
want out of that fight is for themselves to look good. They don't care if the audience likes it. They all as long as they're paid and they get to get their moves in with their weapons, that's all they care about. And honestly, those are the worst fights I've ever seen because they're monotonous, does the same fight every year. At this point, get off the field or do something different. That's my opinion of that. Um, Going into it wanting to have fun, wanting the crowd to be entertained, because that's why we're there for the as entertainers, as performers. We are being paid, hopefully, to entertain a crowd that the producer wants to come back. So that needs to be on your top five of going into a fight. Uh, you, you know, uh, I can't say if I've ever thought about that aside from my fight with Sam and Carly, because I very specifically wanted to interact with the audience. But I've always had that in mind. I've always wanted to, aside also me and Zach, I knew going into Viking era that the Vikings were going to be the good guys, even though they were the bad guys. So
Mhm.
I very, very specifically was like, yeah, no, this is your moment to shine. I'm going to play it up with the crowd, the total hard stone Christian king Alfred of England. Just play it very serious, very to the book, and you are going to have all the fun. And we are just going to let these crowds just boo me off the field. Ironically, they didn't. Um, but uh, but I've always thought about wanting to do a fight where I actually interact physically with the crowd, not fighting the crowd. I'm going around the ring, as you will, because we have a kind of like a squared arena, and talking to people, trying to literally physically interact with people, whether they do or don't, doesn't matter. I want that. I want to bring the people, not literally, but emotionally and metaphorically into the fight. And I think that kind of makes for them, kind of puts them in a way that makes them feel like they're part of it, part of the show. And whether it's emotion or physically, Go ahead. You're saying
And
something.
that's another important thing that you touched on. And Dan is a big proponent of it, and I am a big proponent of it. You have a huge board,
Hmm.
minus the other actors, and even if the other actors are in on it. For example, when I got hit in the eye by Jera and I couldn't see and I went running at one of my own team on the sidelines right next to the crowd. And he's like, Marshall, it's me. It's me, as I'm beating him in the shield because I couldn't see. And then I came up and these people could just see this streak of red across one eye. Use everything. Get as close to the audience as you can. You want them to see you. The
Hmm.
farther away you are, the less invested that section of the crowd is in you.
Yeah.
Uh, that's, but, we have a few people who are very good at using all of the field, all of it.
Hmm.
And then we've had some people, and listen, when you're new, you learn to fight on a line. That's just that's it, you don't think about moving around a lot. But you look at my fight the very first year with Jera and uh
The dude.
the that who will not be
That
named.
guy. That guy.
Yeah, the guy who decided he'd rather go play Diablo 3 than show up for our final day fight. Um so yeah, look at that one. I didn't use a whole lot of the field my very first year. Now, the only thing that made up for that was I chased Jera around the field during the melee when it went active. Like, I literally was all over that field. So, but still, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that was a
Oh,
good
no, no.
point for people who are looking to do this or get
Yeah.
into it. Use it all.
Oh yeah. Like so different scenarios opening up beyond what we did, which is a chess match, chess board, which of course comes in all different shapes and sizes depending on the festival or show or video game if it's Mortal Kombat. Um, but in a situation like SEA or other reenactments that might actually have a legitimate historical circle, which I wish we did. Maybe for the tournament that would be nice, but whatever. When I watch an SCA battle, and now obviously it's very clearly different, right? It's just chaos, and that's the whole point of it. But I see it literally it's just chaos, but they're all kind of converging into one singular mass, maybe like a real battle, if you will. Um, as a performer, also, in the past 10, 12 years, learning to play with the space. I want to see people going up to the crowd, not with weapons, but with emotion, with your personality. And I would love to see more festivals, reenactments, battles, etc., films, if you will, that do that, because I think that is also another way to help draw people in if you have them not just emotionally invested, but that you're not just a zoo where they're looking in on the glass, seeing something that's happening, but they might actually have a say in it.
Mhm.
I feel that is a very important tenet that we don't actually ever really touch on very much. Very few people do. You did with your fight with Sarah, inadvertently with your fight with Brandon,
Mhm.
with the axe, right? Um, but that was the axe getting a little out of hand, right?
Always
Um,
have a backup plan.
mhm, yeah, and Dan always, always, like I remember. And not to be insulting because I love him, but I think the only fight that I really remember of our director previous is his fight with Dan and Dan's kid. And they had this moment where his kid runs off onto the field as our director is about to kill his enemy, his opponent. I don't remember if this is a first or second fight, a second match reference. But he runs out screaming, and he grabs his father, jumps on him, uses his body as a shield, screaming, "Please don't kill him!" And the crowd was just melting into it. And
Mhm.
then, and then, of course, our director drags him off, and and then they continue, and I think that is one of the only fights of his. And I like his fights. He's a solid fighter, but the only one that kind of fits this description of this episode, which very much is an opinion piece. So although I'm definitely putting out some hot takes, every fight that we've kind of downed is still valid, right? If you want to just do it because you like fighting, it's perfect. It's fine. We have some amazing fighters that do that. But me specifically, I love these emotion fights. I love these story fights. I love the fights that aren't trying to fight, they're trying to convey a scenario. And so going back to your fight with Brandon, of whom, I love him, but it is one of those he's there to fight. And he's one of the best of the best. But he's there to fight. And I can't remember a scenario fight that he's done beside the one that he did with you, which was the Robert the Bruce versus Edward the whatevereth. Edward the Second?
Yeah. Edward the, you know what?
Edward the Edward?
Edward the Edward. Yeah, although I did remember finding myself calling him Bruce at one point in time and him calling me Edward. We did the
Mhm.
same thing that Dan and Carl did. And I don't know why it happened. It just happened. It wasn't even like we were trying to do it either.
Yeah, your lands are belong to me. Or no,
Right.
my lands belong to you.
Right. Why, yes, they do. Oh.
I see. I hear that kind of stuff, and I kind of like want to try to purposely put those things in there as like a little catch off guard moment. I tried to do that with Zach, but I don't think I did. But
Well,
in
like,
any case,
I tried to say thank you for having me on the show when I started, and I said welcome twice. Like, it's
mhm.
something just happens, you know.
Yep,
Just you can't stop it. The
yeah.
brain is like, nope, screw you.
No, 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 I did. So I did. And this is very cheeky, so very bad me on that, but I kind of made up for it. Maybe second the year after, probably not. But Zach said something insulting about King Alfred's very strict religious opinion, your religious value, which of course at the time was for lack of a better word, Christian. Um, and I agreed with him. Yeah, but I said it in a way that was obvious, but also kind of clever, and it kind of threw him off for a moment. And I think he laughed or chuckled, and kind of walked off. But obviously, if you know me personally, then you'd know why I'd be putting that in there, and then using Marilyn Manson quotes as a religious figure. But so I don't remember what it was at this point, but uh, but I always like those little moments. But in any case, going back to you and Brandon, the Bruce as Edward II. So obviously we have a setup. We have a very specific situation going on. This is the scenario. This is the whole point of the show. Is these two people are going to war with each other. What we do in the chess match is to convey why and how and blah blah blah, culminating in our king fight. And I know it was also a difficult fight considering weaponry and personalities, but in terms of conveying the story that you had to with the Bruce and Edward and their backgrounds and how they came to Bannockburn, uh, obviously your way of thinking on it. How did you approach that?
Well, I'm gonna be honest here. That year was so stressful on me
Mm,
that I did not follow my rule about um, making my fight for the audience. I did not follow that at all. I had obviously you remember I had both a speech that was handed to me that I had to rewrite because grammatically it sucked.
mm,
Um, I'm just like, I can't do this. The next word that comes in line is not going to be this, and all I'm going to do is trip myself up over it. So I had to rewrite that script. I had to continually practice that script. I had to give the Lord's Prayer, and I haven't been to Catholic school since I was little, but I had to give that Lord's Prayer on top of everything else, including I memorized all of my chess moves. And I did that by humanizing each one of the people in my army, if you remember that.
Yeah.
When I would call them to the front, I would tell the audience who they were and why they were there in that small period of time, or make a joke. One Scottish woman is equal to at least five English men.
And
And
you know, I don't know if you remember how I did the calling the moves of King Alfred here, but I took from that as well. You know, I gave everybody on my side a platform, and I made sure people knew who they were and why they were there. Similarly,
also, it was the first year I had to take singer saving grace because my voice was so blown out by all of the yelling and projecting I was doing.
mm,
But in that one, that was a very different year because not only was I playing with the crowd, I was just inherently playing with the crowd as the king, humanizing each of the people to the crowd, reestablishing my outright dominance to everybody that was there. And when we did the knighting ceremonies, I got strips of flannel
mhm,
for all of the children to wear, and would get everybody in to have it. So it was almost like a shirts and skins war with Brandon's team, which was failing miserably in the getting people on their side. So inadvertently, I was kind of playing with them. But
yeah,
that year, when I stepped onto the battlefield, or when I stepped onto the chessboard, it didn't feel like me anymore. It's one of the very few years that anything like that has ever happened. In fact, with the exception of the fun I had as Pelennor, which was just, something that came together nicely, and I still had myself in that fight, I actually kind of lost myself in that role.
mhm,
And I could feel the people. And when people started saying the prayer along the outskirts of the stands, and I could hear the cheers of that crowd, and I was out there, I could feel more than just me. It was kind of a really fascinating and emboldening experience. Um, so I know with all the stress I was under, I went in there not necessarily thinking directly of the crowd like I should have. But I think through the portrayal, the crowd became me and I became the crowd.
yeah. Similar to an extent with when I was Alfred, you know, just getting lost in the character, in the person, if you will. Um, you know, I very heavily based off of the Last Kingdom's version of King Alfred, but also thinking about how
Well,
a
you are Christopher
person,
Pike lookalike.
yeah, yeah, kind of. Uh, if it was a very bent, awkward Pike. Um, Obviously, there were some people that were really onto our side, and you know, you could hear them. But you know, similarly, obviously, Scottish is going to be the side.
Right.
Viking is going to be the side, and I'm okay with that. That should
Look
be
at how
expected.
popular the Magyar were.
Because they thought you all were like probably Viking or barbarian or something.
The barbarians at the gates, literally.
Mm. And so when you did that, you know, obviously traitor to my country, right? As John Comyn, you taking my seat of the throne, killing my brother. Um,
In a church,
in,
under
in, a,
a
in
flag
a
of
church.
truce.
And how dare you say the Lord's Prayer? But as a character, obviously, it's just grimacing and just like I can't believe you're doing this, you son of a turtwig. And but inside, you know, very emotional, very like this is an incredible moment. That is why we do this, and these are the moments that people should aspire to create, not force, but these natural little moments that happen. Um, Maybe sometimes I'm a little bit more inward. Like I like those awkward moments where we mess up in a fight and you don't and the people don't know, but we do.
Right.
So it's sort of meta in the sense that we're playing our people because the crowd don't know, crowd don't care. Uh, but I like kind of putting our people on edge and making them think it's real because I like those moments that are natural. They progress realistically. They actually grab people's emotions rather than fabricating the actor's emotions and taking the crowds. I also want to take our cast's emotions and make them believe it. You know, that's what I loved about Zach and I's fight, which I think is probably my favorite fight because it had those moments. We made mistakes. We made mistakes people didn't even realize were mistakes, and would come up to me
Well,
like,
you
"Oh,
had injuries that people didn't realize were injuries too.
yeah, one of them." But ultimately, I love when people come up and ask if something was real or ask if this and that. It means that they were invested in the fight. They were invested in us as both performers and people. But it means that it wasn't a boring fight. It wasn't a fight that was just about fighting. It was a story that we told. I have no clue what the story was because I was in it, but uh, it was something that was a moment, and I think that's what, as we narrow down our time, ultimately putting a feature fight should be is creating that moment because it's all we have, both in life but also on the board or on your SCA battle or in a film, is creating a moment to capture the audience, whoever that is.
And here's a good point to that. And this is to the people that casturbate and are only in it for themselves. You might remember that moment for the rest of your life, but will other people out there remember your moment for the rest of theirs? That is the question you should be asking yourself.
Exactly.
Because I've seen some good fights that would literally bore you to tears. Like the fights are well put together, they're well done, but you, especially if we're choreographing something, you go through the moves consistently over and over and over again, and you have to, if you don't sell that this is going on, people are going to realize you're just regurgitating something you've already done multiple times over and over again. So if you don't have the emotion in it and you don't convey the emotion in it through your body language, through your screams or yells, or whether you're victoriously dominant or absolutely terrified, it's
Yeah.
they're just going to go watch Netflix.
Hmm. Or immediately forget it as soon as the next fight comes in.
Hmm.
You know, um, which again, those fights are perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong with that in terms of putting a fight together. But as it pertains to having that moment, that lasting moment as a performer and entertainer, I think there's so much more to putting a feature fight together, if not perhaps a better word, a show together, than just hey, let's play around because I think I'm good at it.
Right.
I mean, I mentioned with Melissa, and it's not a hot take, but I mean, we've had people that clearly were not ready for their fight, and in my opinion, didn't deserve their fight. Um, Not deserved, but earned, uh, uh, and just kind of botched. But there's also people that maybe quote unquote didn't earn it, but really owned it. And so there's a lot of people up and coming, or people who have been waiting, who may be veterans and may not have gotten a fight, who know that they can put their entire heart into that moment that a lot of the veterans aren't because they think,
Well,
it's just another year.
and that's kind of where the tournament circle started coming from. Is
Mhm.
a lot of people, we have a very short window before you're decided on if you're cast for the chessboard or not. Very short window. So new people coming in, they don't even really get their feet wet unless
Yeah.
it's a lean year, and you have to put people out there. Um, so the tournament circle came up, and some people look at the tournament circle as the stepping stone to get on the chessboard. I don't believe that. It is
No.
just a valid and acting space as anybody else. You have the same amount of time, if not a little bit longer, than a person on the chessboard would have. You just may not have the number of people that are normally there
Yeah.
during the chess match. Now, I have seen some beautiful fights on the tournament circle. Thomas Luttrell and Catherine's ex,
Carlos.
Carlos. Their fight was absolutely stupendous, absolutely deserving of being on the board. And these were two first year guys, and they threw this thing together. And I'll be honest, I walked in there, and Dan was like, "You got to see this, dude. You got to see this." I went in there and looked. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's really damn good." And they didn't have a whole lot of oversight. They did
Yeah.
this all on their own, and I was very proud of them for that. Uh, and in fact, I believe, if I remember correctly, they stood in one day because we had somebody out sick.
Yep.
So yeah, and people who were out there were just like, "That was fantastic."
Oh,
Um,
exactly. So, just a brief thing to kind of tag onto that. Maybe a direct word to our cast of that show, and then maybe applies to SEA too, because I don't know how much oversight those battles have. But for the tournament, I am a big proponent of the tournament. Even though I've not been able to get on it because I've just been too busy when we started it up. Uh, but I'm a big proponent of giving those people that space to do that, because that is not a number two show. It's not a step down. It's not anything. It literally is its own show. It
mhm,
is probably in some ways better than the chess match, because you are able to put together your own fight
right.
with so little insight from, or oversight, as you said, that you get to put together your fight, your show, and it's really much more, I think, freeing. Now, granted, I've never watched any of the tournaments, so I'm literally just going off of how everybody that's done it has said it.
Yeah, I've watched, well, when I was
And
capable of doing so, I've watched those shows. Or, a lot of times we're so busy with our fights, but I always took the time to walk over and watch what the people doing the tournament stuff were doing. I took time out of my day to go watch and kind of just keep my eye out to see what was going on.
Mhm.
And walk over, maybe say, looks good, guys, or this, that, or the other thing. And
Yeah,
they ask me questions, and I say, well, I said, we're to the point now that you're not going to be changing anything. And
yeah,
that's, I think, another thing that should be said. Once you get to a certain point in your choreography, there should be no room for change. There should be no, oh, well, this is your last chance to show what you're doing. So, speed it up. No, no, no. Keep going the same pace you've been going, because it's worked so far. You haven't killed each other. When you start changing things is when danger starts being put in. But
precisely.
um, and that was something that I've always hated, that mentality of go and impress me on the final weekend. I don't care for it, and that's my personal opinion, because you never encourage people to change something that could injure them, to
Mhm.
try to in the idea of competition, like to try to win favor. Like that's bad. All of
Yeah.
that situation is bad.
Oh,
um
yeah. Now, granted, at least with my fight with Sam and Carly, I welcomed change I tried to do something different every fight we did, but it was always in a moment where I was playing with the crowd and I had Sam by the hair. So it wasn't any sort of like, well, let me switch the way I hold my sword. It was, how am I going to interact with the crowd differently this time?
right.
Um, so I
Something
think
that doesn't violate the timing or the choreography of the fight.
Exactly. Change is okay if you have the moment for it, like when you're just starting the fight or ending the fight, or you have that break where you can say something different. But it is important to, once you're swinging steel,
In a
that's
non-dangerous situation, it's okay.
yeah,
In a
yeah. Once you're swinging steel, it better stay the way it's been. Otherwise, why are you doing it?
I'll I'll
Um,
I'll I'll give you an example. Um, it's one of the only times I've ever considered this option. Uh, it was before I went out to do my fight, and we're in the keep, and the director put his finger into my chest. Which, number one, I don't like anybody touching, or especially putting their finger in my chest. And he put his finger in my chest, and he poked me, and he goes, "You go out there and make her work for it." Gates, the keep doors opened, and out we went. Pissed me off for the entirety of that match. At the time when I'm already ramping myself up to go out there,
mhm.
that came across to me in a very poor light. I was super pissed, and I think it reflected and I didn't want it to, but I think it reflected in my fight. I think I actually did land a backhand on my opponent, and I did not mean to. And that just, it ruined that last day for me, is what it did. But as a professional, I did it, and I'm still able to remain friends with the person because, in the heat of the moment, things happen, things get said, and you either accept a person as they are or you stop doing it. So,
And kind of closing out here. On that note, right? Yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. I think this is definitely a very pertinent episode for people who may be nervous or unsure of how to approach a fight. And I hope we kind of survey et coagula, the concept, solve and dissolve and coagulate, uh, how to sort of walk into this sort of nature of putting together a feature fight, whether it's what we do on a festival setting, or if you're again doing some sort of reenactment or SCA. I know SCA is kind of like a totally other side of the sunglasses, um, but hello to the SCA people. Um, oh yeah, you know, their wars are wars. I am very tempted to do an
by the way,
SCA
NC,
event,
you're
but just to
tagged
kind
as
of see. I
adult
don't want to
content
fight.
since
I don't want to
at the
fight
end of
at an
that
SCA
last statement,
event.
threw a
I would
couple
love
F
to
words down.
do a reenactment where I'm just like sewing.
Okay, just
That's what
wanted
I'm
to make
doing.
sure.
Mhm. We have one of the most amazing ones that I
Yeah.
watch on YouTube, but also one that is here on our Discord that is on the episodes every now and then. Welsh Viking, who's starting to get very popular, who does fighting for SCA over at York Viking Festival. They'll never hear this, but hello. Um, so yeah, hello to them. But I think that was a wonderful conversation, and I will bring this up when I get back into reenactment. Once I get back into the fight circle. But is there anything you kind of want to tag on at the end there that maybe people should think about or know, both newcomers and veterans?
Yeah, I'll tack on this. It's going to seem overwhelming at first, much like starting a new job. Your boss is going to be most likely overcritical, and some of your bosses you may not like, and you may not like hearing the criticisms from. I will say that be confident in yourself, be confident in what you do. Take the
Hmm.
criticisms and understand them, but when I say take them, knowing some of the people I've worked with and worked for, you kind of have to let it roll off your shoulders.
Yeah.
So going in, understand that there is criticism, but then be able to put the criticism down so you can perform your fight in the best manner you can with your fight partner, and you can perform for the crowd in the best way you can.
Hmm.
So a little bit of detachment, and also It's not like riding a bicycle. You don't just get on it and it's going to happen.
Took me 4
Um,
years. So yeah.
yeah, I mean, just enjoy the ride. Once you get the wheels going, enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I myself, knowing a lot of the people that do our show or have social anxiety, and I've mentioned this in a couple other episodes, specifically with our current director. But one thing I wish, and I will once I get back into it, and I've asked to sort of have a bigger role in doing this, but letting the newcomers who are of that nature, and specifically newcomers, um, that it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's not about doing it right. It's not about making mistakes. It's about being comfortable with what you're doing. As long as you're having fun, that you're comfortable with it, and that you and of course your partner are safe. I mean that's first and foremost, and that goes for every kind of fight. The ones that we've put down, my apologies to those people. I do love you all. Uh, but this obviously was more of an opinion piece episode, but it does apply to all of those as well as the ones we talked about, the ones that are in my opinion elevated by the story that we tell in them. And yeah, just it's okay to fail.
Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. I know in some circumstances, the director's all sitting under a tent. That can be kind of scary. And you might get a feeling of like a cliquishness between different groups of people.
Hmm.
Move throughout them. Don't let that bore you. You're all actors. You're all fighters. They're all people with more experience than you have. And if
Yeah.
you're lucky, new people will teach you as well. Because I always find that when new people go out, because they're hungry, they get that love, that spark that veteran fighters tend to lose, which is why they stop thinking about the crowd. They start thinking only about themselves. Just don't stop learning. You'll learn from the most ridiculous of places, like that you'll never even consider doing it from, and always ask questions. The only stupid question is one you never ask that could
Hmm.
cost you.
Yeah. And of course I've mentioned this before, but on that click note, I mean I'm in that click. I'm in that inner circle, and having that inward perspective, there is no click. There's no inner circle. Some people in it might think, but there isn't. There is nobody you cannot ask. We're all there because we're all wanting to put on a good show. We all want to have fun, and that's the point. So if you not asking is going to make the show worse, then just ask. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Bip-a-da-bop. So that will be that for the Talk Past podcast, as I always tend to say slowly, as if it's going to be like one of those little catch your tongue things, a little tongue twister, which it's not. But that'll be the Talk Past podcast. And I am, of course, your regular host, NC, with some invisible dots next to those letters. And my guest, of course, good friend, the Bruce.
Thank you for having me once again. And for those people who are listening, thank you for taking this journey with us.
Hmm. Hello, all four of you. Maybe 10 in a year. But before I let you go, though, you do another show, right? You still doing the one with the cigar and the coffee? Is it
Yes,
coffee?
it
What is
is.
it?
It's coffee and cigars. It's
Yeah.
potluck cigars on Twitch. We talk about everything from entertainment to gaming while we drink coffee and smoke different cigars each week and give our reviews on them.
Indeed.
Thank you for the shameless plug, NC.
Always, always. And that is that.